Hey fellow backyard boyers, Nick here. Today I'm going to show you guys how to make a kid's bow. This is going to be a lighter weight bow. It's also going to be on the shorter side. It's perfect for younger kids who can't quite pull the weight of the youth bow, because 35 pounds, well, I call it the youth bow. It's more of a teenage to adult bow. But what you're going to need to start is a Schedule 40 half an inch PVC pipe and cut it to 50 inches long. And then you're going to want to mark the center and then 3 inches out in both directions. You also want to mark 6 inches from both ends. So now the first thing we're going to do is flatten this. So if you notice, scenery is a little different because I'm actually in Colorado visiting family. So I'm going to show you guys how to make a bow in about 35 degrees. So let's get started. Alright, first thing we're going to do is flatten out both limbs. I'm going to be using a heat gun. Since I'm visiting, I just went down to the local Home Depot and just grabbed a bunch of things. So this was a $25 heat gun. The pipe I picked up for about $2. These two boards I actually got out of their called lumber section for I think about $1 for the two of them. So the other things you're going to need are your spacer blocks. They can be wood, but because I had the PVC on hand, I just cut two. They're half an inch tall each. So these are going to become the spacer blocks for this flattening jig. Another thing you should have is some sort of heating trough. This is just a piece of aluminum foil about 3 feet long or so that I've folded over just to stiffen it up. This is really important because of the low ambient temperature. It's going to take away a lot of that heat really fast. And this foil will actually help retain the heat a little bit. So you'll actually be able to flatten this even though it's about 35 degrees out. So here we go. Okay, the pipe is hot enough when you can actually go and press each section down with just finger pressure like this. So I'm just going to heat it up nicely one last time. I'm going to have to do this really quickly. I'm going to move this over to this board, make sure these are lined up, and then I'm going to flatten it with the other side. And as long as this is soft enough to where you can press every inch of this with just finger pressure, it should only take about 50 pounds of pressure to flatten. So if you weigh less than about, I'd say, 60 or 70 pounds, you may need somebody's help. Okay, here we go. Move this over, line it up. Bring the jig over. And press. And there we go. Alright, so here's the limb, nice and flattened. We've got a really subtle taper here. So this is going to be a very lightweight bow. Now, what you need to do now is just sight down the limb and make sure that it's straight. You can do minor straightening right now while it's still slightly warm. Alright, so you can see it's closed up on the end. It's got a decent thickness right off the handle. So now I'm going to heat this other limb up, flatten it, and then we'll move on to the handle. Alright, now I'm going to be heating up this handle section and shaping it. So I've got my heat gun down here. I'm going to turn it on. I'm just going to heat this handle up. So I'm going to go from a little bit past this line all the way to a little bit past this line. Here we go. So once it's hot enough, you just want to flatten it out. So I've put a little bit of if you can see, the handle's a little pushed over to the side. This is going to become the top limb on this side. That way, when you hold this bow, it's a little closer to center so that the arrows are less likely to be affected by paradox. This will just make the bow a little more consistent in shooting. So once you've gotten this, I've put a little bit of a reflex into it, maybe about 2 inches at this point. So I'm just going to let it cool off, and then we'll move on to recurving the tips. Here's our bow so far. It's got a nice subtle taper going from the tip down to the handle and out the other side. So if you look at the bow now, it's got a pretty good flex to it. This is our top limb. So you can see right now the top limb bends just a little bit more than the bottom, but it's got a good flex all the way out. So now what we need to do is heat up this tip to 6 inches, and you need to get a 6-inch pot or any cylinder with a 6-inch diameter. If you wanted to change the length of this recurve, then you'd simply get another pot or cylinder that matches that. So if this were 9 inches, you'd want a 9-inch pot. That way we get a 90-degree bend on this. That'll give us our nice static recurve. So I'm going to heat this up, and once it puffs out and it's back to its normal pipe shape, then I'm going to form it around this pot. So here we go. Alright, so once it's returned to its full shape, what you want to do is take this and bend it around the pot. So you just want to make sure that you have a nice 90-degree bend here, you can see. And just let that sit until it cools, and then we'll work on the tip.